A very good day to you. I'm Howard Feldman. This is a Synthesis podcast. Joining us today are some very, very special guests, and I'm really thrilled to be able to have this conversation. It's a subject that I am very passionate about. It is a subject that many of us at Synthesis are passionate about, and it is an absolute privilege to talk about the informal sector, entrepreneurship in South Africa, and how we make a way, how we can help to encourage this sector using some of the technologies along the way. Joining us today is Chipo Mushwana, and Chipo is the Divisional Executive of Emerging Payments at Nedbank Group. She's got many years of experience in the space and is passionate about entrepreneurship. She is creative. She has her own fashion label, which supports the establishment and development of micro entrepreneurs. Very, very good morning and welcome. We also have two members of the Synthesis team, Craig Leppan and Pierre Aurel, who will be joining us as well. The final guest today as well is Gigi Alcock, entrepreneur and author. Fascinating story. Born white in an apartheid South Africa, but raised and bred as a Zulu man, learning the skills of survival in South Africa. His activist parents raised their two sons like young Zulu boys, herding, hunting, and living in a very, very difficult rural environment. Good day, everybody, and welcome. Thanks for taking the time to speak to us today.
Hi.
All right, so let's start off with just getting a sense, and maybe Gigi, we can start off with you, the sense of what the so-called informal sector looks like. You know, there's this concept, this may be a misconception, maybe it's true that the informal sector is there when the formal sector is in trouble a little bit. I'm not sure whether I agree with that based on an economic basis or not, but give us a sense of where we're actually at in South Africa.
Sure. So I think that there's huge misconceptions about the informal sector, and generally there's this kind of perception that the informal sector is in essence the spaza sector, which, yes, that spaza sector is part of the informal sector, but there's a huge amount more to it than that. There's also this perception that the informal sector is subsistence and survivalist, and if people could get another job, they would leave their business and go into formal employment. Which is also completely incorrect. So if we look at the informal sector, I coined the term Gasinomics, in essence, the economics of the townships, but it is really just to find a term to encompass this. But if you look at the informal sector, it's all around us, not only in townships, it's in inner cities, it's on the street outside where you are, you know, it's all over industrial sites and so on. And it's represented by a broad range of businesses, literally across every sector. So we have the spaza sector, which is worth about 150 billion rand a year. Then we have what I call gasikos, or fast food, that's about a 90 billion rand a year sector. Even the muti sector, traditional medicine, is almost an 18 billion rand a year sector. We have then other sectors. Backroom rental is another huge sector, 25 billion rand a year in backroom rental. Spaza rental earns another 20 billion rand a year to township households who rent out the spazas to immigrant traders. There's a Gasi auto sector, about 80,000 people in the auto sector, from township panel beaters to car washers to repairs, mechanics, from literally the small guy on the side on the pavement replacing your brakes to guys who can replace Mercedes motors and so on. Then there's the hair salon sector, about a 10 billion rand sector. The alcohol sector, taverns and licensed taverns and shebeens, where we have almost 50,000 outlets that are licensed. And I could go on, so there's the hawker sector, about 500,000 hawkers. If we look at just the vegetables trade, the Joburg fresh produce market turns over 7 billion rand a year, and 60% of that turnover is going into the hawker and informal sector. So yeah, there's many others. There's a catering sector. There's the building sector is another really big sector, renovating and building houses in the townships. Stokvel sector is another sector, savings and buying group stokvels. So I could go on, but yeah, but I think the key is that many of these are substantial businesses, sometimes turning over up to 50,000 rand a day on the larger, for instance, fast food outlets. Even a hawker on the street corner selling vegetables turns over or can make a profit of about 2,500 to 3,500 rand, turning over about double that turnover. So a lot of money in this sector. It's not recognized.
Well, that's what I want to. Right, so that's what we want to try and look at. And Chipo, if I can bring you in here, how has the formal sector managed this to date? The banks, the other financial institutions, how have we married these two economies together? Have we?
Very interesting question you bring up there, because I don't think we've done as well as we should have done. I think that the reason why it's referred to with terms such as the informal sector is because there isn't enough data, there isn't enough recognition, there isn't enough protection from the likes of government for these particular sectors that Gigi has just mentioned. So in terms of financial services industry supporting these small, micro, medium-sized, and some large-scale businesses has really been not as significant as it should be. And I guess that's why we're having the conversation today, because we do acknowledge and we do realize that there's so much more that we can do. But secondly, that the very future of the South African economy, considering all the socioeconomic factors that surround us, we've got the highest Gini coefficient, the rates of unemployment, youth sitting at home, we have to support all types of entrepreneurship in this country to make sure that we grow the economy.
Do you think that South Africans are entrepreneurs by nature?
I think we are all entrepreneurs by nature. I do think that in that there is some default entrepreneurs, of course, right? If I were to lose my job today, the first thing I'll think about is let me buy something and sell it because I have to keep afloat. So you become a default entrepreneur. But I think a lot of South Africans represent a whole lot of grit and zeal that we've seen over the years. If you take the taxi industry, you take the hair salon industry, all these industries that have survived despite being on the periphery of what we would call the formal economy, is a significant indication of the entrepreneurship spirit that exists in every South African today.
Right. So it's definitely, we're accepting that it's a significant market. We're accepting that South Africans are entrepreneurs, whether it's because they need to be. Gigi, if I can ask you, is a lot of the way in which the sector is structured today, is that an apartheid legacy story, or is this common to many other developing countries?
Cool. I just want to comment about the question about, are South Africans natural entrepreneurs? And I think that we often, have this idea of an entrepreneur being a Elon Musk and a
sure we do.
And I mean, one example I've written about is a youngish lady, 34 in Pretoria, who owns 8 what she calls Spatlo Palaces. And she turns over a huge amount of money. In fact, she bought herself a Range Rover Velar the other day, cash, from her takings. And yet, we don't consider someone owning a fast food chain like that making really good money an entrepreneur, because we've shaped our minds around kind of IT and other things. And in fact, the previous Minister of Small Business said we need to create more entrepreneurs in the township. And it drives me crazy, because there are entrepreneurs, but we need to recognize someone owning a hair salon, or as Chipo said, a taxi, the taxi industry and stuff. Those are all entrepreneurs. To your question, I think the reality is the informal sector grew out of apartheid within South Africa, But the informal sector, to a large extent, is very similar and almost identical in Gastronomic Revolution, the book I wrote. I reflected on the informal sector and examples and case studies from Nigeria throughout Africa and South Africa, and they're remarkably similar. And they're driven to some extent by lifestyle and behavior and the informal nature of many businesses in Africa, and sometimes just the communal nature of Africa means that you would rather go down the road and get your hair done by a trader, a salon down the street, or you would get referred to a mechanic who's the right mechanic, or try this builder. Which, funnily enough, is reflective more and more of modern formal societies. If you're on a WhatsApp group in your suburb, you find people saying, I'm looking for a mechanic, or I need a new gate or a new kitchen. And so to an extent, African informal economies are driven by kind of local and neighborhood business. And if you look again worldwide, the growth of local and neighborhood business is growing. But I think importantly, the reason I called my book Gastronomic Revolution is that there's a massive revolution happening throughout Africa, and particularly in South Africa, where that informal sector is actually invading and challenging and disrupting the formal sector. If you look at the spaza sector, it's seriously disrupting the likes of ShopRite, Pick n Pay, Spar, and so on. The fast food sector, really strong, and so on. So it is a sector that is really disrupting and growing. And while in South Africa, it may only represent, say, anywhere between 25 and 40% of our economy, in other parts of Africa, it's 90% of the economy.
Right. Okay. So, Chipo, coming back to you, because let's talk about the transactional nature of this industry. I would imagine in the past there's been a lot of cash. That's become more of a problem in terms of crime, in terms of COVID. People have become very cash wary, as we don't want to hand things from one to the other. This presents, I would imagine, a massive need and a massive opportunity to onboard the sector.
You're absolutely right. And it reminds me of a stat that was done by the regulator not so long ago. And 9 out of 10 payments in South Africa are made in cash, right? That's really what we are sitting with from a South African perspective. And people often think that the use of cash, it's insane, right? And people often think that the use of cash happens in this township economy or in the Kasi only. What they forget is that when somebody from that very economy comes to render a service to me, which they do in whatever neighborhood or suburb that I find myself in, by virtue of me having to pay that person for their services, that person will demand cash because they're out of the formal system. So we're really seeing that cash is being used all around the board, right? So in this particular industry, and particularly in light of what we're facing now with the global pandemic and people becoming sensitive in handling cash and touching surfaces, it got to a point where financial services institutions like ourselves were forced to accelerate our efforts in terms of digitizing cash. I do not think that we can eradicate cash use completely. I think we've seen that globally that is not possible, but we can definitely digitize a greater part of that cash by providing an end-to-end ecosystem, not just for the payer, but also for the one that is receiving those payments to be able to receive them digitally. And that's why we talk about contactless payments. How can we make that more available to merchants within the Kasi, within the township economy, and making it, most importantly, affordable? It's not just accessible, but it must be affordable. And this is where we find ourselves today.
I did read a stat that the use of smartphones in South Africa is incredibly high. This should aid that process quite significantly.
It definitely does. It definitely does. And we're seeing the use of smartphones in making payments, whether it's scanning a QR code, and more recently, the technology that we have out, namely tap on phone. We're seeing that a lot of the merchants that we've put this capability in their hands are really taking to it, have warmed up to it, and are using it. And it's been an interesting journey to watch how not just the merchant, but the consumer is really eager to use these technologies and make sure that they're safe and their loved ones are safe as well.
Right. Let's just talk about this tap on phone business. And Gigi, I'll come back to you in just a moment because I wanted to know. We'll chat about something further on this. But Chipo, how does this work, and how is it being managed?
All right, so tap on phone in essence is a capability that enables anybody with a compatible handset, in this instance we're talking about the Android operating system, to be able to convert their phone into a payment acceptance device. Now, just think about this for a minute. A lot of the merchants that we talk about, particularly small, medium-sized merchants, often find the ability to procure a physical point of sale device. Some call it a pay machine, a card acceptance device. There's so many names out there. But the initial cost of getting that device in South Africa has been staggering, right? It hasn't been favorable for a lot of these merchants that are either operating small operations that are on the go, or that are seasonal entrepreneurs, right? Because some of these businesses are up one day and they're down for a week or so, and then they get back up again. So tap on phone is really saying you can turn this handset that you have in your hand into a payment acceptance device without additional hardware, without the dongle that you need, etc., without access to the internet, all these other barriers that we've seen that inhibit small businesses in accepting digital payments.
Right. And Gigi, from your perspective, do you think that this is, although it's very convenient, do you think that there will be a process getting people on board with this? Or is this something that this sector is likely to embrace?
Yeah, I think people make the mistake of saying that this sector is low tech and unsophisticated, and it's crazy. You know, I mean, I've spoken about a Gogo I was chatting to who was in her 90s, who belonged to a Stokvel, and I said to her, Gogo, how do you communicate with each other in the Stokvel? And she said, hey, in Danami, I use a what? And I was like, what's what? And she reached into her breast and she pulled out this little Chinese smartphone and she opened WhatsApp. And she said, I love this what because I just send one message and it goes through to all the members of the Stokvel. You know, I've got a picture of a trader in downtown Johannesburg at a wholesaler with 3 smartphones, one against his ear and two in front of him, you know, checking prices at different points. So the reality is that the penetration of smartphones is really high, and people know how to use them. The use of WhatsApp or Facebook Lite and so on that come preloaded on these smartphones is really high. I think there's also a fairly high sophistication in terms of utilizing cards. I mean, we have one of the highest card penetrations in the world at low income level. Because of social grants, we've issued about 12 million debit cards to social grant recipients who generally gogos or young mothers. You know, so we have an average, I believe, Chipo will know better than me, but around two debit or credit cards per person in this country, which means we've got incredibly high penetration of cards. People know how they work. And then on the other hand, you've got the phone and the comfort with it. And recent insight work I did with consumers showed that they found WhatsApp and Facebook and their phone a far safer tool than utilizing a computer. And that's to an extent the kind of familiarity with the phone. They know how it works. They'd rather use an app, a banking app as an example. So I think that very, very, you know, the ease of penetration is going to be, you know, quite easy. Also think just to go into a Chipo in terms of cash usage. You know, the mistake is often made to say that people prefer cash, which is actually absolute rubbish. People don't prefer cash. They have no alternatives. They don't have somewhere where they can pay using a card on the taxi, at the hawker, at the spaza shop, at the hair salon, and so on. So the minute you leave the formal environment, you have no choice but to use cash. So in essence, any enabling functionality where you don't have to buy an expensive device, should change that dynamic and create more alternatives in that space.
I just want to bring in Pierre at this point. Synthesis has been involved in developing a product called Halodot. Pierre, can you just give us an overview as to what that is?
Yeah, sure. So effectively, Halodot is this contactless technology that Chipo was talking about, more commonly referred to as tap on phone. And, we started the journey with Nedbank approximately 2 years ago as early adopters, and some of the first in the world to actually do this, along with MasterCard and Visa, to enable these contactless cards to tap on any commercial Android device. So effectively, we're providing the capability to everybody that they don't need to purchase a dedicated payment device. And, it's taken some specialized development work, which, Synthesis has got great depth and experience in all this cryptography and payment-related technology. So essentially, we've been working with Nedbank on piloting that over the last year. It's now in market and live. And the fantastic thing about this is it started with a contactless payment, but we're identifying a whole lot of new use cases that you could use tap on phone for. And effectively, our product Halodot is sort of the underpinning tech that will enable those use cases.
I'm also going to ask Craig. Craig, you've been very much part of this journey, and you're tremendously excited about it on the Synthesis side as well. Give us your thoughts, please.
How's it, Howard? Yeah, thanks. Absolutely very excited about it. And also having met up with Gigi, maybe 2 years ago in Marozat, discussing this concept. 2021 is the year when the technology is now finally ready. It's been getting here. So it's not as if it's been available prior to this point. There's certifications happening. But for me, what's exciting is, you could have been in a formal market like London or Singapore a year ago and seen this work, where cash is being phased out, where people are saying we don't even take cash. But to see it happen in this economy, in this environment is huge, And I think the big question is, can it land? Can it become a safe payment space for that economy? From looking back to the other techniques like, Pocket Pass, which I worked with Nedbank, MasterPass as well, there's always some little barrier, having the consumer with the technology or the merchant technology, some mismatch. For me, tap on phone, where the consumer has his card and the merchant has the smartphone, is just really fantastic. And, we hope to see this happen this year through a combination of collaborators.
Mm-hmm. Chipo, what excites you most about this?
What excites me the most is really what this technology signals. It signals not just for the township economy, but what it signals for retail across the board, right? Think about, I always say, I remember one of our colleagues asked me a question and says, but is this just for the township economy? I said, we created it for that because we acknowledge that there's a problem in this country around costs and digital payments. But really, if you think about the technology and how scalable it could be, you could be in a Woolies and you pick up something in the aisles and the corridors, and you don't have to go stand in the queue, right? You can complete your transaction with one of the attendants right there, and you walk out. This is what this technology actually does. It liberates everybody that's in the retail sector. And that's what's exciting about it. What's exciting is when I think about this technology for tuk-tuks in Kenya, or, for anybody in Nigeria, and I think about people in Morocco selling spices, I'm like, this is so scalable. It has no barriers. It has the same security protocols that any point of sale machine has. And it's cost effective. So this is really, really amazing. And it's going to transform the lives of not just merchants, but consumers as well, as we adopt more digital payments, as we become more comfortable with digital payments and these new ways to pay, right? As people become more comfortable, like you said, people want to do payments on social media channels. And we've seen tech giants move into this space as well. And we're saying from an African perspective, we are ready. We are going to leapfrog like we've done all the other technologies. And we're starting here in South Africa.
Gigi, your thoughts? Game changer?
Yeah, I think, as per my previous thing about giving people alternatives, I think it's really about how do you enable small traders and across the board, I agree with Chipo. It's not just in the township, the little hair salon that's working from home because they, lockdown closed where they were working is now working from home. How does he or she operate and so on? So I think that, it's really about the more you can lower the barriers to convenient, cost-effective payment methods, the less we will need to rely on cash. And I think consumers and potential customers or merchants, are ready for this kind of thing. And it's really about probably your biggest job is letting more people know about it so that they able to engage with it and try it out and once you've got the experience and once you have traders using it, they're about to start telling each other it becomes viral.
And they are very organic in terms of growth that way, which is always the best thing possible. Unfortunately, although we can continue this conversation for hours, it is so fascinating and it's got so many different levels and so many different interest points. We do need to call it. We do need to leave it there. Gigi, Chipo, Pierre and Craig, thanks everybody for your time. There's no doubt we're going to reconvene on this conversation a few months down the line and talk about some of our learnings and talk about where it's at. For me, it's tremendously exciting. I think that this has just the most immense potential, and it changes lives. And I think that to me is just the most exciting thing about it. This has been a Synthesis podcast. I'm Howard Feldman. Thanks for joining.